Good evening and welcome to The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Wise, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Strategy at Ryerson University. In each episode of The Naked Entrepreneur, we reveal the naked truth behind successful entrepreneurs' biggest achievements. On tonight's episode, we're featuring founder and chairman of Sleeman Breweries, a true Canadian icon, Mr. John Sleeman. John Sleeman has always been destined to make it big in the beer business. The name Sleeman's is a historic Canadian brand dating back more than 5 generations. But John Sleeman, the man behind the brewery, had an unlikely journey to running his company. In grade 10, John dropped out of school and moved to England to marry his girlfriend. It was there that John's love for pubs and beer business first emerged. Upon returning to Canada, the original Sleeman empire was reignited when John's aunt gave him the original recipe book and bottle dating all the way back to 1834. Through taking big risks and overcoming large obstacles, including losing his house and a divorce, John Sleeman turned his luck around and sold his business for more than $400 million. Today, John Sleeman remains a Canadian icon and chairman of Sleeman Breweries. Welcome back to The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm Sean Wise, and with me, Mr. John Sleeman.
Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here,
Thank
John. John, we almost always start at the very, very beginning. So I want to go way, way back with you. In our entrepreneurship class, we talk about, are entrepreneurs born? Are they bred? In your case, I got to ask, can entrepreneurs be adopted? I know that you're very comfortable talking about that and the role it played.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. How do you think being adopted affected you?
Well, you know, as I've gone through my personal and business life, I've met people who are adopted, and some are uncomfortable talking about it, some are uncomfortable admitting it. I look back on it and I think I'm very fortunate. I could have been adopted by wolves or axe murderers, you know. I was fortunate enough to be adopted by the Sleemans. I lived in a foster home for a year and a half when I was first born. And the Sleemans weren't able to have children, and so it was nice to be welcomed into a family where I was really appreciated. And over the years, no one else in the Sleeman family of my generation seemed particularly interested in restarting the business. There was never any pressure from my parents for me to do it, but there was always encouragement for me to do whatever I wanted to do, and they were very supportive. So, you know, I sometimes wonder, you know, you read articles from people who know an awful lot more than I do about sometimes children who are adopted feel the need to be more successful because they have to prove something. And, you know, there may be some truth to that. I've always felt the need to be able to stand up and say that despite my beginnings, I was able to do something and be successful. So, I mean, I certainly don't regret it, and I appreciate it, and I'm very proud of the fact that I was adopted. And if in some way the message that adopted kids can be successful gets out there and helps other kids in a similar situation, that's a great thing.
Now you talk about the family business or the Sleeman business way back from the 1830s. But if I'm not mistaken, you were in an alcohol-free household growing up.
Yeah, it's true.
Is that a little odd to be a beer mogul and come from an alcohol-free background?
I do remember my dad kind of looking at me as if there might be something wrong in the way I was raised. And, you know, living in a house where alcohol wasn't part of our life, to end up in that business, especially seeing as I was adopted. So you can't really say, you know, it's in my blood. But, you know, the family weren't in the business of alcohol. They didn't consume alcohol. And I've never really had extended conversations with my mom and dad about that, other than to say, their memories of the family losing the business are not generally positive. I mean, that's probably a bit of an understatement. And so there was never any desire to perpetuate that kind of thing. But equally, when I got into the business and they realized that I wasn't going to be dissuaded from it, they were very supportive. I mean, I don't go home and sit around and put away 24 bottles of beer with my dad on a Friday night or anything, but we have had some very interesting conversations about the family history. And you know, coming from a family where there was no alcohol consumed gives me a real perspective on what it's like to sell beer or beverage alcohol to people in circumstances where there isn't alcohol consumed. Some people have alcohol abuse problems, and it makes me more acutely aware of the surroundings where I earn my living.
I want to talk about earning your living, but I want to stick with this start young. Were you always entrepreneurial? Do you remember when you first felt that bug?
I don't know if I would be comfortable saying I was always entrepreneurial. I certainly do remember at the beginning of high school when teachers were trying to encourage students, other students and I, to think about what they wanted to do for a living. My dad worked for the telephone company, and Bell Telephone in those days, you know, there was job security. Now, you know, large corporations, there's no job security. But in those days, you were thought of as being a little bit crazy if you didn't want to have a steady paycheck and, you know, 2.3 children in a house in the suburbs. And when I was 12, 13, 14, I just didn't get excited about the idea of working for somebody else. I know I'd be sitting in the back of the classroom. I never sat in the front near the teacher unless I got hauled up there by my ears because I wasn't paying attention. But I'd be in the back of the classroom thinking about, if I wasn't sitting in here right now, I could be out doing this, or I could, and it wasn't chasing girls and playing football, although that certainly did come up once in a while. But it was how, you know, I'm wasting my time here. I don't need an education to do what I want to do, which is wrong, because I learned later in life, if you don't have the education, you got to hire somebody who does have it, and that's not a bad thing. Entrepreneurs need to learn to be able to have people surround them that are better at things than they are. But to your question, I seem to remember in grade 9 and grade 10 starting to think increasingly about working for myself. I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to be in.
Had you worked for other people? Is this when you worked for McDonald's?
I hadn't started working for McDonald's yet. I had some part-time jobs just because I liked the independence and a little bit of cash flow. In those days, minimum wage was 85 cents an hour, so you weren't getting rich very quickly working, you know, at the corner store. But it gave me independence, gave me an opportunity to learn how to work with people. And I did come to the conclusion that I'd like to work for myself. And one of the things that seemed to reoccur was I'd be working for somebody, and then I'd go up to him or her and I'd say, you know what, if we did it this way, we could be more efficient. Or if we did it this way, we could make more money, or whatever. And sometimes that was greatly appreciated, and a lot of the times it was, hey, you know, you're 14 years old. Grow up and come back and talk to me in 10 years. But I remember constantly looking at the environment I was working in and coming up with ways that if it was my business, I could do it differently. And so, you know, are entrepreneurs born or raised, or, I don't know, I think entrepreneurs perhaps have a higher risk tolerance than others. And if you agree with that, or if you believe in that, then perhaps that's a personality trait. And if it's a personality trait, you're probably born with it. I mean, you know, some of the great risk takers are also great entrepreneurs. And so I think you can hone your skills with education, but I'm not sure you can be made an entrepreneur. I think it relates more to the type of person you are. And are you comfortable taking risks, or are you comfortable working for Bell Canada? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. I think you just need to decide what you want to do.
Now, you decided at an early age that school wasn't for you. You left school in grade 10, you moved to England. Other than class boredom or lack of engagement, what was driving that decision to make that move, to try something different?
You know, if you ask the people that have been part of my life, either working with me or family members for the last 30 or 40 years, apparently there's a common theme, which is incredible impatience. And so I'm
Yours or theirs?
Oh, mine, and then ultimately theirs with me, I'm sure. No, I got to the point where I just thought, I'm learning stuff that's never going to make me rich. I'm learning stuff that's never going to make me happy as a successful businessman. What do I get pleasure from? You know, I get pleasure from working for myself, coming up with an idea, having people tell me it's not going to work because I'm crazy, and then proving them wrong.
So is it the intrinsic, I want to prove them wrong, I want to run my own show, be master of my own domain, or is it the extrinsic? I want to be able to count the cash, not be dependent on people.
As long as I have had enough money to do the things I want, which doesn't mean owning the Taj Mahal, it means living a comfortable standard of living. The money is not what I get up for every morning. It's the challenge of building something, especially when someone says that's never been done before, or you're too young to do it, or you don't know what I mean, there's a real challenge when, at the end of the day, you can do something that other people said wasn't possible. Certainly the fact that money falls out the bottom is nice. But equally, I think if you're a really tried and true entrepreneur and businessman, you've made money and lost money. And I have. I've made a lot of money and I've lost an awful lot of money. And getting up the next morning after realizing you're broke, if it was all about money, I'd probably be pretty upset about it. I get up in the morning and go, well, that didn't work, so let's start over. So it's not really about the money.
It's about the challenge, about
it's absolutely
the
about the challenge.
Let's talk about the challenge. So you moved to England at a high school age. I believe, if my notes are correct, there was a young lady involved in the decision making.
Isn't there? Yeah.
Making that mind up. What were your plans? What did you moved to England? What did you hope to accomplish? What did you think was going to happen, and what did happen?
I went to England because I wanted to experience another kind of lifestyle, and I thought, 19 when I got married, if I'm going to do something really stupid and move to another country, you better do it now before you have debts and kids and mortgages and stuff like that. Got nothing to lose, so this is the right time to do it. And I thought perhaps after living there for a while, because my first wife is English, I saw through my kind of narrow vision, I saw a country that was still very much steeped in the class structure, and in my opinion, wasn't particularly entrepreneurial, didn't particularly encourage entrepreneurs. Now, that may not be the case. But I felt that there might be an opening, because if nobody else was doing it, maybe I could and be successful. After a year or two living there, I realized, because I didn't come from the right side of the tracks by the British cultural standards, that I was never going to be as successful there as I thought I could be back here, where I knew the rules of engagement and I understood that society supported entrepreneurs, and you could be rich or poor. It didn't matter where you came from or if you had a title. So I came back to Canada, but while I was in England, that's when I started my love affair with beverage alcohol. I went to the pubs, and sure, I enjoyed having a pint of beer, but I started to see there was a business opportunity here. People liked it. We didn't have that kind of thing in Canada at the time, so I came back to Canada with the idea of bringing something that was successful in one culture, and I thought it could be successful here, but nobody was really doing it.
So you found an unmet need and wanted to tap into it.
Well, I thought there was an unmet need, yeah.
Did you have any concerns that some of the industries in Canada can tend to be oligopolies, have a couple of big players that may not like change in the industry?
Absolutely.
Did that ever occur to you before?
Oh, absolutely. And to me, that was, my glass is half full. That's an opportunity. There have to be customers out there who don't want to buy products from 2 or 3 large companies. The large 3 North American automakers thought they had everything, and then other people started making really great cars and offering different things from different parts of the world. Canadians are world famous for many things, hockey, etc., but one of the things they're famous for is their love of beer. Well, let's give them something a little different.
Well, when we come back from this commercial break, we'll continue discussing something different with Mr. John Sleeman. Welcome back to The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm Sean Wise, sitting down with beer maker extraordinaire John Sleeman. John, when we left, we were talking about oligopolies and entering into new markets. Why do you think incumbents, the large players, are so terrified of the little guy?
I don't know if I share your opinion. I don't know that they're terrified. When I have conversations with the large multinational breweries, they acknowledge that small breweries help to create interest in the product category. and they've got 80% market share. So, I mean, no one likes to give up market share. But it's generally thought that if we can, there's an expression about a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
So if the small brewers can contribute to the general reputation of beer and bring new customers in who are interested in it, that's good for the industry. So I'm not sure that they're afraid of it. I mean, I remember when I started Sleeman's, they didn't think we were going to be around, and they kind of dismissed us as 1 or 2% market share. They're a bit of a pain in the neck. And they're tough competitors, but they were never vicious. I mean, I'm sure there are some industries where the large competitors are vicious, but the beer industry in Canada particularly is government regulated, and if you can be efficient at it, it's reasonably profitable. And if you don't do something stupid, you should be able to stay in business for quite a long time. If you think about beer businesses, they have generally been family owned. Anheuser-Busch, Molson, Labatt. There was a Mr. Labatt. There was a Mr. Carling. So if you give the customer a good product at a reasonable price, you build brand loyalty. And as I said, nobody likes to give up market share, but there's generally a big enough pie that if you do it right, everybody can coexist.
Well, maybe afraid isn't the right word. Did you experience any pushback, any undermined tactics? Did you ever experience?
It still happens today. Yeah,
So they're not afraid of you, but they're not going to allow you to have access to their beer bottles or their distribution rights. So
yeah,
I appreciate the political nature, but you're trying to get your beer onto the shelves, and they're trying to stop you directly, indirectly.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go on in the industry. You walk into a bar one day and they agree to sell Sleeman, and then you put the equipment in, and 2 weeks later, somebody else's beer is pouring on your equipment. And, how did that happen? Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm going to the Super Bowl and they bought me tickets. Well, I guess I should have got Super Bowl tickets too. And when you're a small company, you can't do that. So you find ways, if you're a good entrepreneur or a well-run business, what do I have that will make me unique in the face of large competitors? If I can't buy Super Bowl tickets and fly you to San Diego or whatever, what do I have that will make you want to sell our product and make your customers ask for it? And it's not all just about graft. There's other things you can do too. Do you do advertising so your customers go in and say, I saw this ad on the TV the other day and a bunch of pirates, and I think it had something to do with Sleeman. Well, if you drive the customer in, eventually the bar owner is going to say, I better start carrying that stuff because people are asking for it. Most people don't walk out of the bar because they don't sell Sleeman. But if you have it enough, then other people come in and it becomes something, hey, I can get a really good pint of Sleeman at this particular pub. So you have to find out, if you can't compete on the same level with your competitors, what can you do that will make you successful? And they're so big, it's hard for them to scramble and do little things. And they've got all kinds of computer programs that tell them how much money they can make on beer volumes down to this level, and below that it's not worth it. Well, how about you play in this level? Because your cost of goods sold are so much lower that you can be successful as a small brewer. And you can build all kinds of customer loyalty. And they can still have their huge volumes, but you're the guy that's getting written about in the press because you have these unique products. And you're getting, the early adopters are coming and going, yeah, I was in this pub the other night and they had this really cool beer that I never heard of, but I discovered it. And I'm not drinking blue or Canadian, the stuff my dad drank. I'm drinking this really neat stuff that I discovered. Well, why can't you be the one they discover?
Sounds like you turned a limitation into an opportunity.
Well, I think that's what good businessmen try to do, and I'm not saying I'm a good businessman. I
would say that.
No, if I'm good, it's because I surround myself with people who are smarter than I am, who see opportunities that I miss, and then give them the opportunity to go and do it without getting upset with them when they fail.
You mentioned the pirate commercials and the variety of using the namesake and the history. But before you know it, you become synonymous with the brand. You become a face of a brand. Is there any downside to being the Sleeman on the side of the box? And what's that like?
Well, my family we've had some fairly serious security issues around my wife and kids. It's not nice living in a house that has all kinds of security around it and sometimes police protection. And I'm in the beer business. I mean, imagine what would happen if you were a movie star or an arms dealer or something, or a drug dealer,
That's next week's show.
I got to tune in for that. So yeah, there are some downsides, but generally speaking, people are very positive. Sleeman is not a very common name. Wise, a little more common. But, you know, you get off a plane in Vancouver, hi, I'm Sean Wise, they probably don't go, like the TV show. But I get off a plane in Vancouver and I say to the Hertz guy, I want to rent a car, and it's, got any samples? Yeah, sure, yeah, I always carry my, 24 bottles of beer in my back pocket. But they're generally positive, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to be associated with something that people feel passionate about. And the downside is that, you know, maybe my wife and I go out for dinner and someone pulls a chair up and decides to talk to us about the beer business. I love doing that. My wife's not so keen on that, but, you know, you have to live with it.
Now, I know that some people don't feel that strongly when their customers decide to invite themselves to dinner, when their customers want an autograph or to give you a new recipe. How, with such demands on you, do you manage to stay so humble? I mean, you may not want to call yourself a success, but I know everyone in this room would call you a success. I know financially one would call you a success, and I know having a personal relationship with you that I'd call you a success. But you still remain incredibly humble. How?
Well, there's nothing like going bankrupt once in your life to give you some humility.
Tell me about that.
Do we have to?
Yes. The naked entrepreneur,
I only want
not
to
the
talk,
semi-naked
I
entrepreneur.
want to talk about my fabulous successes, not my fabulous failures. Yeah, I mean, I wake up every day and realize that people don't have to drink my beer. I would not be anywhere if people didn't take money freely out. It's not like I'm selling penicillin. You don't need what I do. It's purely disposable income. And there are lots of ways for you to spend your money on someone else's beer. You don't have to sell it. You don't have to buy the beer that I sell. So when a customer is happy to see me and wants to interrupt my dinner, that guy's he could be paying for my dinner. And if I get arrogant, I won't have anybody buying my beer. And it doesn't take very long for you to go from being a success to a failure. When I opened the brewery back in 1988, overextended my credit. I was using credit cards and cash advances and anything else I could do, check kiting and everything else that was illegal to try and keep the doors open. Not suggesting you guys do that. And it was tough because I really believed in the project and not a whole lot of other people did. And it was pretty close to having padlocks put on the doors.
Where does that courage come from? I mean, I read
I'm
one
not sure
point.
it's courage. It might be bullheadedness. It's a desire to prove people wrong. You know, when they say you're going to fail.
But you put up your house against payroll.
Yeah, and I lost it. Yeah.
And yet you still moved on. How do you bounce back from that?
Well, we don't have debtors' prisons, Sean. You wake up the next morning and I said, you know what, if I lose everything, I'll go back to McDonald's and flip burgers and start all over. I mean, it's not an I haven't done anything dishonest. I'm not going to jail. I just dreamt too big and I couldn't pay for it. That's not a sin in this country.
No.
So you wake up the next morning and plus, you know what, I had 50 or 60 employees who had mortgages to pay for. And they had faith in me that I was going to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and I owed it to them. Plus, you don't want to fail in front of your family. What kind of example do you set for your kids, your wife and your kids, if you give up? It's not very good.
Now, you didn't give up, and the story ends well. You end up exiting the business, $400 million. What was that like? Did it have
painful.
Tell me about why it was painful.
Before the commercial break?
Before the commercial break.
This could go hours.
I have all the time in the world. There's editing.
Well, I never started the business to flip it and make money. This is the Sleeman Brewery is my third business, and I enjoy building businesses. I enjoy the satisfaction of waking up knowing that some crazy idea actually worked. And so when it became apparent that some other players in the industry were interested in purchasing us, it was not my desire to succumb to that. And through all kinds of various things that happened, I went from having control of the business to not. We went public, and I went from owning 66% through dilution down to about 22%. And that's not enough to stop somebody from buying you. You know, they make an offer. And so what I had to do when I finally realized that the business was going to end up in someone else's hands, because I just didn't have $400 million of my own money to prevent it from happening. I then needed to find someone who was what we call a white knight, someone who would hopefully preserve what we had built, the people's jobs, the brands, the breweries, and let this thing continue. And it was tough. You know, I'm sure a lot of the folks in the audience don't remember this, and you probably don't because you're much younger than I am. But many years ago, Pierre Trudeau, Prime Minister, was faced with the situation where he had to decide about his future, and he went for a walk in the snow one night at midnight. And so I kind of, and I remember that because I was getting interested in politics and I was very young, and Trudeau seemed much better than the other guys. Not that I knew anything about politics. But as I followed his career and then he went for this kind of midnight walk in the snow, I thought maybe it's time for John Sleeman to do his midnight walk in the snow.
So tell me about that walk. What were you thinking? What was the result? How did it feel?
Well, it was difficult because I was trying to balance off personal pride, the possibility of this being perceived as a failure on my part. You know,
being bought by someone for $400 million is a failure.
I know that seems funny now, but you know, it was never my plan to be bought. It was to continue to build the Sleeman legacy for the next 2 generations, my kids, and so on and so on. And so I realized I had a tough decision to make. Do I fight to the bitter end, possibly cause 1,000 people to lose their jobs, lose out to one of the larger players who would make the beer in their own facilities and wouldn't need any of our people or any of our plants? You know, you would get Sleeman made at some other facility. And I was told repeatedly by some of the suitors, look, you'll be very rich.
You, but not the rest of the people who made
And that
you.
was part of the process was, you know, is it important to be really rich and have people out of work, you know? So you go for the walk and you think, well, there's disgustingly rich, and then there's the amount of money that all my employees make every year, and they're happy. Is it really impossible to be happy at $50,000 a year, or do you need $300 million? And so I decided the right thing to do is look after your employees.
So when you sold the business, you had certain requirements that were important to you,
Mm-hmm.
keeping the brewery open, keeping the people employed.
Mm-hmm.
How did the suitor think about that? The eventual purchaser.
The Sapporo people were very good. We sat down and we came to an agreement about a certain time frame during which they would keep all of the employees and keep all the plants open, and they've lived up to it. Now, business changes over the years, and you can't hold people to something forever. But we had an initial agreement, and you know, the business is continuing to flourish. And I still have a job there. I thought I'd be sitting on a beach someplace clipping coupons, but I still go to work every day.
How does it feel to have a boss again?
Well,
I mean,
I've been married twice. I know what it's like to have a boss. Usually I can escape it when I go to work. And no, I mean, they're very good because you know, in their mind, people still think John Sleeman and Sleeman Beer. And I'm the chairman of the board. I'm still involved in the majority of the decisions. I'm still doing the creative side, so the TV commercials are about the family heritage. So I mean, it's sometimes I would like to have a little more control, but you know, I'm a control freak. That's what I do. I build things and I micromanage. And there comes a point in your life when you probably are better off letting other people make some decisions.
Well, we're going to be better off to let the students ask questions, and that's going to come up next.
Okay.
Before we do that, I want to talk about what makes you afraid. So I read in an interview that the only fear that you have is a fear of dying before you get everything done. You got 2 daughters, you got 2 sons, you've had 2 wives, you've built 3 businesses, you've had ups, you've had downs. What's left? What do you want to do next? What's making you afraid that you're not going to get to it?
Well, I'm sure there's some other business opportunities out there.
Can I interest you in one? I brought one.
At some point, I don't know whether the Sapporo people would like me to continue to be involved. I love it. It's my family's heritage. but I hope to have enough brain space to be able to consider other things. And I have no intention of, putting on a pair of pants with my belt up here and rushing out to have dinner at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Florida. I would love to die behind my desk doing something really cool. And I'm sure there's lots of things left out there for me to do.
One of the cool things we're going to do is turn it over to our students to ask questions. We'll be back after these commercials with John Sleeman.
Some ideas are hot. Some ideas are not. This is a hot idea. Twitter, using 148 characters to instantly digitally connect with anyone in the real world. This is not. Jersey Shore, 8 characters, not connected to anything real in the world. This is a hot idea. Facebook, efficiently sharing social news with your friends. This is not. Using Facebook to show how drunk you were at the office party. This is a hot idea. Posting your unwanted goods to Craigslist, the world's home of free classified ads. This is not. Posting your sister to Craigslist. Friends don't let friends pursue bad ideas. Find out if your idea is hot or not.
Welcome back to the Naked Entrepreneur, and now, student question.
My question is in regards to whether or not you think entrepreneurship is a career or a lifestyle. And if you do believe it's a lifestyle, what way do you think entrepreneurs should maintain a balance between being entrepreneurs and family and social life?
Well, that's a good question. I think that it turns out to be a lifestyle. It has for me. And one of the things that I have always struggled with and never been very successful with is trying to find a balance between being in business for myself and having a home life, because I don't think of leaving the job when I go home. In my case, even when I go home, I'm John Sleeman. I have people come to my door at 10 o'clock at night saying, will you sponsor my baseball team? I get pulled over by the cops for speeding, and the guy sees my driver's license and goes, cool, I like the honey brown. So even when I'm in trouble with the police, I'm still John Sleeman. So I think that if you're really entrepreneurial, you tend to live it, whatever you choose as your career. And I think if you are an entrepreneur, you may have, as I have, started three different businesses, but I've lived every one of them 24 hours a day, and through, as Sean so nicely pointed out, 2 wives and 4 children, I seem to still fail at the idea of balance. And my family have often commented on the fact that they very often play second or third fiddle. So, for entrepreneurs, it's something that you need to come to terms with. Are you prepared to give up your family life?
Did you? Did you have to pay that cost? Brett Wilson
Absolutely.
came in and talked about being alienated from his children. You've softly alluded to a divorce, but was that the result of this trade-off?
I suspect so.
Balance?
I mean, I think you tend to spend every working hour, every waking hour thinking about work. At least I do. And you need to find a pretty special person that's willing to be in a relationship with you if you're going to spend so much time worrying about your business. You need to have confidence that your personal relationships will look after themselves. And there's not very many, if you're a guy, there aren't many women who are willing to be in that kind of relationship. The first couple of years, it's really exciting with an entrepreneur because you're flying all over the world and you're spending money, and you might be famous or well known. But after a while, you really would like to just go home and have dinner and be a normal family, and that's pretty hard to do. So I don't think you can have entrepreneurialism as a career. I think it's what you do for a living, and it doesn't stop at 5 at night.
Hi, my name is Abby.
Hi, Abby.
My question is about, you said you were involved with the ad campaigns, and I love your ads. One of the things that I noticed is you embrace your notorious family history. What inspired you to do that, and do you see any downside with that?
Well, that's a good question. Over the years, I've been, if you want to call it in public life, I mean, I'm not a politician, but when you put your name on something, you're well known. I've always thought it would be better to be in control of what the public thinks of you than to be surprised by something. And so, if you're hiding the fact that you're adopted and somebody decides, for instance, to surprise you and use it against you, then you find yourself playing catch up and apologizing for not telling people. And so I know my dad to this day is not particularly thrilled about our marketing campaigns because he was the generation that wasn't in the beer business as a result of us getting caught smuggling. But that was 50, 60 years ago, or 70 years ago, or whatever it is. And it's gone from being an embarrassment to the family to it happened. If we don't talk about it, someone else will bring it out, and then we'll look as though we're apologizing. Why don't you take your glass that could be half empty and make it into something that's half full? So, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of skeletons that somebody's going to drag out of the closet before I die, but my plan was, is this something that we could have some fun with? Is this something that would resonate with a younger group of consumers? Doesn't particularly get a 55-year-old guy driving down to the beer store to act like a pirate, but you'd be amazed how many university students think it's kind of cool to drink a beer that was either made by pirates or smuggled to Al Capone. Well, we can hide that, or we can have some fun with it. So, there are some downsides. I get letters from various...
The Anti-Pirate League.
Yeah.
Those in favor of Al Capone.
Well, you know what? We did get some letters from people who thought we were glorifying murder and crime. And, I can certainly see their side of the story. I don't condone what Al Capone did to people, but he was a very good customer of our families. And,
We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
We're talking about family history, and I know you have a good knowledge of your family history. Do you have a favorite ancestor? Is it the plunderer, the pirate, the smuggler, the mayor? Is there one that you like?
Well, there's kind of two favorites. There's the who would I like to be like, and that would be, the pirate or the mayor or somebody who smuggled beer to Al Capone. But I think the person I admire the most is my aunt, because when the family got caught smuggling, the authorities in Ontario said to her, look, well, actually said to her father, my grandfather, no one with the last name Sleeman will be able, we're going to take your liquor license away from you, and no one with the last name Sleeman will be granted a new license for 50 years. You need to be taught a lesson that will last one generation. Obviously didn't have much of a sense of humor. And so what we did is, what my aunt did is she said, okay, I'm going to keep a recipe book and an old bottle of beer, because she was quite young at the time, and we'll just see if 50 years from now, somebody in the next generation or the generation after would like to restart the business. And so, as I said earlier to Sean, I'm noted for having no patience. So the idea of waiting 50 years just blows me away. And here's a woman who decided this was too great a family legacy to not, somebody should look after it. Let's not let this thing get away from us. So I didn't know anything about, or very little about, the Sleeman Brewery as a kid, and she waited till I was about 30 years old and said, okay, here we go, recipe book. So I think that's probably the person I admire the most, is someone who, you talk about entrepreneurial vision. She didn't want particularly to be the business person, but she felt someone in the family should do this. And so I think of all of the Sleeman family, obviously except for my mom and dad, she's the person that I admire the most.
I think I speak for everyone that we're all thankful that she kept that book.
We are.
Maybe none more than you.
None more than me.
Thanks so much to John Sleeman, our guest tonight
My
on The
pleasure.
Naked Entrepreneur.
My name is Lindsay Nancy Goodchild. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Green Gauge.
Jonathan Trong, founder and creative director of Tokyo Mouse Inc.
Mark Coleman, the co-founder and president of WebRocker.
No matter what the idea, be it product or service, profit or nonprofit,
Ryerson provides education, resources, and funding to help start and expand your businesses.
Relationships with other entrepreneurs can be a huge factor in your success. You may see that rock, and is it a diamond or not? How would you know? Talking with other entrepreneurs can help you know.
Tonight our guest was John Sleeman, who proved once and for all that extraordinary success and humility are not mutually exclusive. I'm Dr. Sean Wise. For myself and all of us here at The Naked Entrepreneur, good night and good venturing.